Hey Katie, how are you?
Hey Nyambura, I'm good, thank you.
It's good to see you.
You too,
And
albeit
now,
virtually.
yeah, and now it's during like the festival, thinking about the time we met in March. Remember March was the first time? And then
Yes.
COVID happened and we weren't
Yeah.
sure about the films. And then, and then regrouped in our commissioning process, I think around August, I believe, right?
Yeah, that's right.
August,
That's
yeah.
right. Mhm.
Wow. So how's it going at NOWNESS?
Yeah, it's going good. I mean, this year's actually like there's a silver lining to it because it's actually been a really great year for us.
Oh, wow.
And we found like our films have been performing really well. The audience is really engaged, and I mean, we hope we're bringing some inspiration to our audience during this strange year. But yeah, that we've been getting like our social media followers have increased by a huge amount, and
Wow.
yeah, and we
Congratulations.
yeah. So it's all good news from this side. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Good to hear. And one of the exciting things about NOWNESS and the No Direct Flight partnership is we're actually watching two films that were commissioned part of the NOWNESS process and one that's upcoming. So Allumuah's Curtis Essel, and then we also have a premiere, which is so exciting for us here at No Direct Flight, premiere of The Dream That Refused Me by Jabu Nadia Newman, and then an upcoming film with Justice Nana that we'll see sometime next year. So it was really interesting for me because I came into the process a little bit later. The relationship had already been established with Gayleen, with NOWNESS, and the BFI's No Direct Flight program film season. And so I initially didn't realize that I'd become part of the commissioning process. And I really wanted to, actually. The fact was I really wanted to, but I wasn't sure like how would we navigate or how would that happen? And then eventually I did. And it was really exciting because out of the career I've had, it's one thing I've never really gotten to do. So as I just wanted for you to really tell us more about like the commissioning process and NOWNESS's commissioning process. Your films are so eclectic, and you know what is your commissioning process like, and then maybe also talk about how No Direct Flight and NOWNESS, how that commissioning process also evolved. It'd be really great.
Yeah, sure. So just for those who don't know, NOWNESS is a global video platform, and we like to say it's a platform for the culturally curious. And we're dedicated to creating and curating the very best in video content. And our goal is to inspire and entertain our audience and present excellence in digital storytelling. So what you see on NOWNESS, probably about 60% of it are films that are sent to us. So they're submissions or films that we see at festivals around the world or we come across. And we have a lovely programmer called Marley, and she watches everything. And then when we release the films, we build a whole campaign, like an editorial campaign around them to really give them a moment. And then the other 40% of films that you see on NOWNESS are actually original commissions by us. And there's sort of three different ways, I suppose, that the commissioning works. So I'll chat you through those. The first is we have our editorial formats and series. So the formats, a series like In Residence, which is about looking inside the homes of our artists and architects. Great Gardens, which is about landscape designers and beautiful gardens. And My Place, which is a little bit more informal, look into the homes of artists and musicians and creatives that we love. But it's a bit more about the idea that the home is a reflection of who you are as a person, less sort of hung up on the design details as such. And those as their formats, they've got quite a strict kind of structure. So for example, within Residence, we always like to use very rigorous cinematography and almost a photographer's eye to really capture the space and the angles of the architecture. And then, so we work with directors that we know are great, that have that eye and are good at interviewing. Yeah. But then we also have what we call our more creative series, which, for example, are like Define Beauty, which is all about smashing up issues in the beauty industry. And that series it's a lot more open. And what we'll usually do is pick a series of topics that we want to explore. And then we say to the director, right, you focus on nipples, or you focus on body hair, for example, and they'll find a creative way to respond to that issue. And for example, other sort of creative series we work on, or actually we call it a season. It's kind of almost like a quarterly magazine cover. One of these was Survival Season, which is all about, we're ruining the environment, what are we going to do about it? So we challenged 4 directors to look at their 4 elements of like earth, wind, fire, air, and respond to that in a creative way. And I think directors really love working on those, like directors that have gone on to do commercials and just want to flex their creative muscles a bit more, or directors that are more up and coming, and they're sort of exploring their points of view and their creative visions. So they're the 2 different types. And then the third one is branded, which of course is like kind of the lifeblood of the company, really.
Well, we have to keep our lights on somehow.
Yeah, completely. And that's where clients come to us with a brief or an idea, and then we'll go back to them with a creative response. Say, you could approach this through a documentary, or you could approach this through fiction. And then once we've signed that off with the client, we'll go out to directors and ask them to send in their treatments of the film that they'd like to make. And those come in as and when. And I guess the journey we usually like to take with directors is to first showcase their film on NOWNESS, then commission them for an editorial project, and then move on to the more higher budget branded work. But I guess in all of those, we're looking for great storytelling with a strong point of view, and a good visual aesthetic. Ideally, an aesthetic that's sort of pushing the boundaries a bit, so it feels new and exciting and fresh.
Oh, wow. So would we say that's how Gayleen approached you, in the sense of, this is something that we're looking to explore, no direct flight, really around a lineage of aesthetics? How are we breaking those boundaries? In what ways are we also exploring past, present, future? And then a focus on emerging filmmakers from African to African diaspora. So when that brief came to you, how was it at NOWNESS? Was it an exciting time? Was it, what was the response?
Definitely, yeah. And now, like, we were really excited to partner on the program, to commission those 3 films, because also as a global video platform, we're really dedicated to featuring the work of diverse and underrepresented directors, and hearing from voices that we don't usually get the opportunity to hear from, and being able to give the opportunity for like complete creative expression. So that was a really, really exciting opportunity for us. And we're also really dedicated to supporting up and coming directors that are just breaking through, and giving them that platform. And I think some of the works that have been featured in the No Direct Flight program, and were an inspiration as well to us for the project, were films like Jen Nakiru's Rebirth is Necessary, which was commissioned by us, and Rhea Dillon's Process, which was commissioned by us. And we were also involved in the sort of late financing of Terence Nance's Swimming in Your Skin Again. So it was all those films, that we loved. So we were really excited to work in that world. Shall I chat through the brief a bit? And
that'd be great. Yeah. Because just before you do, I also wanted to say, for those watching, that the films that you mentioned, Process, Swimming in Your Skin Again, and Jen Nakiru's work, sorry, the name escapes me, is that it was what was it, the London touchdown, so to speak, London launch of No Direct Flight. And it was quite interesting because I then had to decide which ones to keep. And then I ended up having, instead we ended up having Allumuah, and now the premiere of Nadia's film. So it's really exciting how it got to travel. And then what we'll do actually with this, we'll just set up links to the different films, so that even if they're not part of the No Direct programming in Nairobi, they will be part of the program in general, where people can actually see them. So yes, please walk us through the process. That would be really great.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to talk through like how we approach commissioning with the No Direct Flight brief in mind.
Yeah.
So we always think about kind of what, the why, and the how when we're writing a brief. So the what in this case was to create a short film that explores themes of diaspora, specifically African people returning to and connecting with the continent, or African people exploring moving away. And we wanted to look at that through the lens of this new diaspora aesthetic that we talked a lot about. And one really key component of sort of the what part of it was that the director should work for the first time with a new collaborator via digital networks. And that's all part of illustrating the power of online interconnectivity.
Yes.
And then, so the why are we doing this? We wanted to talk about how the internet had enabled cross-continental communication between the African diaspora image makers, which has led to the creation of this new diaspora aesthetic, which I'll talk a bit more about in a bit, and how that has repositioned African diaspora filmmakers as sort of global tastemakers.
Yes.
And then in terms of the how, we wanted the director to put into practice this idea of the internet as an enabler by working with a new collaborator. And that should be someone that they've never actually met in person, but they'd maybe seen online, like a composer or an editor or a writer or a digital artist, and someone they admire but hadn't had the opportunity to meet. And the film should tell an engaging and visually compelling story in response to the theme of Pan-African diaspora. And that the film should have a really clear point of view and make a comment on an element or experience of diaspora. And that the film should be visually impressive, make an emotional connection with the audience, and just bring the human into the digital interconnectivity concept. And then we also identified these diaspora aesthetics that we're talking about, that we've seen coming up in several films. And it's this idea of, non-sync sound, it being a direct portrait that's challenging in some way in tone, spirituality and magical realism, futurism, dream space, circular time, memory and use of archive. And then the themes we were thinking about were like the importance of beauty, approaches to styling, fashion, and the way like black skin is lit in front of the camera. And then thinking about how the internet is somewhere to dig the past as well as visualize the future, and Afrofuturism in the sense that the past is a contested space and that the future is imagined. And then in terms of those commissions, we were specifically looking for like younger up and coming directors who hadn't necessarily had their kind of big splash moment online or in festivals. We were looking for to commission 3 episodes. One was by an African American director, one by an African British director, and one by a director from the continent.
Yes.
So those were the 3.
Wow. I actually am very interested how you actually so eloquently put together the notion of the diaspora aesthetics that are coming up, and things that I think we are also thinking about on the continent, in the ways that we're making our films. We're moving away. Well, not all of us. There's a cadre of people that are moving away from what is seen as a classical, conventional, traditional filmmaking. My version is like shot reverse shot, where they're actually just they're testing story, like the stories they're choosing themselves. A lot of them are not set in contemporary times. They're playing with time more often than not. And really, I love the talk about like the time. How is time portrayed through these films, and what is explored in that time, and really honestly, even the locations that they're choosing. I think for me, looking at some of the films that have come out of Nairobi, and I mean just around the continent, and just how just being bold and ambitious about setting what the setting is now. You get to see different places that you do not ordinarily see of yourselves on television, or because for us, primary place of consuming ourselves will be on television or YouTube or off the phone and all of that. And I was really interested how that notion of the internet really became a part of the storytelling, that I really enjoyed. And I really, there is actually a film out of Nairobi that's going to be playing on Tuesday. No, it's playing on Saturday. It's called What's on Your Mind. And it is really about this woman's life on the internet.
Oh, wow.
I'll send you the link, like you have to watch it, and just how internet culture, Facebook, all of those influences her perception of self.
Yeah.
And it's quite tongue in cheek and everything else, but it was quite for the time it came out, it was pretty fresh as a film. Sorry, I have a moth joining me. Bye. It was pretty fresh as a film. People hadn't done that in Nairobi at that point in time, and it's always stayed to me as a director who's testing something new. And even later in their work, Lawrence and Anthony tend to tell us stories from perspectives that we don't ordinarily explore from. So that was really, really exciting. And for Nowness, for me, it's also just really, when we got into the commissioning process, is the care that was taken, I must say, on Nowness's part. I was just like, okay, let's see what's going on here. I'm a latecomer. How do I participate? How is my contribution going to be useful and valuable to the process? And where are you guys headed in this? And some of the moments that we had was really enjoyable for me. I sometimes I had just so much work, but I was like, we're meeting with Katie and Sandra, and we're going to have such a great time figuring out which films, what themes, what stories, which director really didn't just responded to the brief creatively, and how they situated, particularly the digital, because that was something that some didn't really take that leap, but particularly because I came when we were commissioning Jabu's film, and that blew my mind. And I was like, yes, that was really exciting, and the care that Nowness took, yourself from Nowness took, was very heartening. So I want to move to the next kind of question, where how do you feel with because also the focus on up and coming directors, I think is really great, because a lot of our filmmakers are really emerging, up and coming, or they're slowly moving into a more like established career, but really there's that we're still emerging in that sense. So on the world scene, they might have been making a lot of films where they are, but on the global scene or internationally amongst themselves. So with the Nowness commissions for No Direct Flight and the focus on the up and coming filmmakers, how could you say, I don't know what this is, the question exactly, but how would you say Allumuah and The Dream That Refused Me, how has it contributed, do you feel like, to how Nowness maybe has expanded, or how it views have things shifted a little bit with this type of films and filmmaking and this type of commission? What has opened up in the Nowness space, so to speak?
Well, I think what's really interesting about these films is that we did give some steer during the treatment process, and notes on the treatment and notes on the films, but to a greater extent, we kind of sat back and let those filmmakers say what they wanted to say. Because it's also about recognizing, like for us in the Nowness office, it's not our story. And it's about making sure, giving that, because I suppose like if I look at A Defined Beauty, some of those beauty issues are more just global in the media, and there's lots of different points of view about them. But it's more like we usually take a Nowness stance. But with these films, it really was handing over to those filmmakers to say, what do you think? What's your point of view? And that really came through. And I mean, even on Jabu's film, we didn't have any notes in the first edit and the second, which is unheard of.
Wow.
So that was, but it was
I'm going to use that tidbit of knowledge in her Q&A. I'm going to be like, hey, we heard that you. Yeah, wow, that's amazing.
But it was just so confident, and her vision was so clear that we just said, okay, we're not gonna mess with this. I mean, we'll always look like from a storytelling point of view or a craft point of view. But yeah, we with her film, it really was, we were blown away. And it was so refreshing for us. So yeah, that's definitely something I think we take moving forward, is to be sure to give that creative freedom when working with up and coming directors. Yeah.
All right. So I'd like to thank you very much for your time. And before we leave, I'd like to ask you about what toolkit would you advise filmmakers? Because I mean, not everybody will be commissioned by NOWNESS, but this is a moment that we learn what the commissioning process is like, kind of demystify it. We found out from NOWNESS that there's a sense of creative freedom. And so how would you see, what is a toolkit that directors, filmmakers need to consider to get commissioned in general? Like, how do they get noticed, aside from just saying creative excellence, aesthetics and all that? How do you, it's the grind work that doesn't get really the recognition, I think, to some extent, but I'd love to hear more from you.
Yeah. So it's also in terms of like the work that filmmakers are making, it doesn't even have to be perfect. If you send it to a commissioner like me or any other commissioner, because what we're trying to look for is the magic in the film, and to see that filmmaker's vision. So it's just, don't obsess too much about having the perfect film. It's about making something that comes from within yourself. And that it's a story you need to tell, and not only you can tell, but it's something that is personal to you. And then there's other more practical bits of advice I could give. For example, sometimes directors will write to me introducing themselves, but they don't really have all their work in one place. It's not easy to, so it's really important to have, say, a Vimeo channel or a website where we can get a sense of your work and your style. And also having an Instagram that it has your work, it has mood images, it sort of encapsulates what you're all about. Because more and more we're actually finding we're going to Instagram to look for talent. Yeah, so it's quite interesting. But it's something like I'm always following directors just to keep a track on what they're up to. So that's something that's worth doing. And also you can submit your work to publications like It's Nice That is a UK based one. It just features art and photography and video that they find interesting. Or maybe a publication like Natal is also a good one for supporting artists. So if you just send your work over, if you get a feature, that's just really nice coverage for you as a director and helps us find you. And then the other thing is, if you contact a commissioner, it's always useful just to mention what your interests are. Because actually quite often we'll be thinking, well, who's a director that really cares about the environment? Or is there a director that's really into dance and movement or fashion? And so if we know your interests, that really helps us to commission you. And then I guess, yeah, on the filmmaking side, I'd say always think about, how do I want my film to make the viewer feel? How do I want the viewer to feel at the end of watching it? And coming back again to that, what's my point of view? Why am I making this? And also just to be really tough in the edit, because the biggest complaint is, it's just a little bit too long. So it's chopping the fat as you go along is really, really important.
I mean, we're precious about our shots.
I know, it's hard.
Our babies.
I know. I have these conversations all the time, and it is so hard. And especially if you're a director who also does the editing as well, it can be quite difficult to let go of certain parts of the film. But sometimes the overall impact is stronger when you just tighten it up a bit. And then I think the last thing I'd mention is, when you actually go to release your film online, if you're doing it independently, make sure your cast and your crew have the link, have all the assets, the images, the text to post, just so that it creates like a moment online. Yeah.
Oh, that's really great. Wow, that's really great. I'm also learning. I was on one end. Next time, if I want to shift the other way, I'm also learning. So it's really great. Thank you so much for the time that you've given us, Katie.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And thank you for NOWNESS, and thank you for the partnership with No Direct Flight. I can't, Allumuah played on Saturday, this past Saturday, the 21st. And because we had it in a watch party, people who came later kept on asking, can I see it again? So I was kept on playing it again. So the watch party took like an hour and a half.
Wow.
And yes, just to let you know, people really, really, really loved it. And we're creating a premiere moment for The Dream That Refused Me by Jabunazia Newman. And they're from South Africa, by the way, everybody. So it's she's repping the continent from the NOWNESS commissions. And we're gonna have a premiere moment around 9:30 p.m. East African time on Saturday, the 28th of November. So I'm really excited about that. And we were just talking a little bit, and she was like, no, I'm not letting anyone see it until it premieres. So we feel very privileged.
That's so exciting.
Yes. So thank you so much, and have a great, great evening. No, actually, it's afternoon for you now.
Afternoon, yeah.
So you take care. Thank you very much. And we'll keep on talking about Justice's film that will be premiering later in the year or in the beginning of 2021.
Exactly. Yeah. All the best for the rest of the festival.
Thank you so much.
Bye. All right. Bye. Talk soon.